So we're now live. Welcome back to Strategy Immersion Training. This is the week 8 live stream, and as we've been covering through these live streams and Strategy Immersion Training, we are finding places where it really matters that we go a bit deeper, we cover more detail, and I give you some additional deeper dives into what we cover in an already pretty advanced uh, immersion training. So this time around, I think this is something that shouldn't be a new subject for you if you're in strategy immersion training, but it is a new way, I think, of looking at it, and uh, I'm really desiring today to provoke a different way of dealing with and looking at beliefs in you and beliefs in your clients as well, and how they have a gigantic impact on your life and on other people's lives in a way that is invisible to you, in a way that is also invisible to your client most of the time. So think of this, what I call the belief trap, like like we all live in reality, but we also see that reality or experience that reality through a filter, let's say. And so, you could call this all sorts of different things, but you warp your reality basically, right? So, I see you, you see me, we talk to each other, people do different things. And so, how the world occurs to us, the way the world actually shows up, is somewhat warped. It's skewed from what actually is. And what has it skew that way is what we, in this particular training, are calling belief. So, whatever our present beliefs are, they warp or skew or filter, or they pare down, they narrow reality. A lot of people talk about how their clients are walking around with blinders on. Those blinders, so to speak, are your beliefs. They're your clients' beliefs. So you have this warped reality basically. But the way that that reality gets warped is is through a very tangled web of what I would call lies, like a web of lies, right? Why do we use that term anyway? Like, what web of lies? I think the reason is because each like somebody's lying to us, or let's say a group is trying to give misinformation. They can't just say one thing that's not true. They can't just have one lie. They have to have this entire web of lies, so that the one lie actually, like, people will actually buy into it. Because if you just try to get people to believe one thing that's maybe even obviously not true, it's really doesn't work very well unless you build that lie upon a whole bunch of other things that that individual or that group assumes is true. Most of the time that stuff's not that true either. So I just call it a web of lies, right? So consider this, that even though, like, especially like we just had an election, if you're not watching this at that time, that's fine. But most of us have experienced, even if we're not the one experiencing it, other people uh, having very extreme emotions, or putting a lot of stock into things that they're really just opinions for them, but they look at them as fact, and they're building that opinion as if it's a fact on other opinions that they also have tremendous certainty and intensity around. They have a lot of emotional intensity driving that conversation. So you notice it a lot in politics, especially nowadays as people are getting more and more extreme. How one assumption that not everybody agrees with, but one assumption builds into another one and another one and another one, to the point where people have completely diverged in terms of their realities. Now, social media helps with that, of course. And so now we have factions of people that are so tremendously in rivaling camps, differing camps, because because they don't just disagree on like one or two things. They disagree on everything because every single belief, every single idea is predicated on other ideas. And those like webs, so to speak, those sets of ideas, those clusters of ideas, they all agree with each other, but none of them agree with anybody else's, right? And so we have all these like little wars of beliefs nowadays. And so the reason why this is happening, and the reason why this happens with your client, where they get kind of stuck in their life at some point, and this will happen for you and me as well, we all get trapped, so to speak, is that we get trapped in our own beliefs. We have these beliefs, they make sense to us, they seem like they're true. We build in more beliefs, and ultimately we get trapped by ourselves. We get trapped by our own ideas. What was once an opinion is now reality, right? And we can't bend and flex and be agile to get around that reality, because in order to do that, we'd have to stop believing what we believe. We'd have to alter our beliefs, and people don't alter their beliefs very often. So I'm going to show you this today. You have a belief, and that belief is not just, well, this is the way things are, or this is my rule for the way things need to be, or this is what has to happen, or this is the way people are. It's not about just the belief itself. That belief turns into a lens, so to speak, which shapes reality. Right? It turns into a filter which shapes reality. It turns into a premise, so to speak, like a thesis that shapes reality for you. So you think of it like that, like a lens, like my beliefs are a lens through which I look at the world, and that shapes the next beliefs that I now adopt. Because if reality is shaped by my current belief, and then I'm going to create new beliefs, those new beliefs are shaped by the other belief that I already had. And how so? Because that belief warped everything that I see, and therefore everything I see is the only thing that I can utilize to create the next belief, right? So beliefs create more beliefs, so to speak. So a belief that you have turns into a lens that further shapes the next belief, which becomes a lens that further shapes the next belief, that becomes a lens that further shapes the next belief. And so we've got these lenses upon lenses upon lenses, and we're going down this weird, narrow passage, and eventually we're down a blind alley that I would call a trap. We trap ourselves with a series of beliefs, like a domino effect, if you will. So does that make sense? I'm going to come back to that, because that's my entire thesis for today. That is the premise here, that you are trapped by not just a belief, but you're trapped by the fact that that belief then narrows your reality, so to speak, as somebody might say, or it warps whatever beliefs that can come after that, and therefore eventually there's only so many things that you can even possibly believe, and therefore how we live, how we act, how we perceive the world, what we'll do or not do, like how we'll feel or not feel, is all predicated on those beliefs. So we trap ourselves in these beliefs. I'll give you a visual of this. All right, so this is my, think of this as my garden, right? I grow a variety of different leafy greens in my garden, and recently they've hybridized kale and collard greens and stuff like that, to the point where you can grow these not just for like a season, but forever, and they'll just make more and more and more. They'll keep growing up if you let them forever, for as far as you can stake them, or if you cut them, they'll grow out to the side. So what happens here is, what I discovered is, I can plant my kale, and then it'll grow up and it'll put out some leaves, but then it'll grow up some more and put out some more leaves and grow up some more. You get the idea. Now, if all the growth is at the top here, this is where all the new stuff forms, right? This is all the novelty in the world of this plant. If I want to change the way this plant is structured, all I have available is to prune it, right? It's like a tree, you got to prune it back. If if I want to have no control over it, I just let it grow, and guess what? It's just going to keep growing up. It's going to keep shooting leaves out to the side. It'll just be this straight plant that has a very narrow life, right? But with tree collars and tree kale and some other bushy plants, you can actually prune it back. You can, let's say, cut it here. Okay, so we're removing all of this. This is out of here now. And guess what happens? The plant doesn't die just because this has been pruned. It basically goes back to the last kind of segment that it grew, like the leaves that it grew. Let's say it's right here. And then it'll shoot off new stems in, let's say, 2 or 3 different directions based upon where the nodes are, right? Like that. And guess what these do? These now grow out, and then you get new growth from there. And the same here. They keep going in this direction, that direction, right? So the tree or the kale or the whatever you got doesn't die. Not everything you can prune like this. But in my garden, I can actually create this giant bush of leafy greens, and I got greens coming out of my ears then, right? And it just goes on forever and ever and ever if you let it get bushy like that. But most of these naturally don't. This is kind of like an animal comes by and just gnaws off the top of it, right? And it's just this survival response that they learn. The reason I'm explaining this to you is because this has nothing to do with, my garden, but this is the way beliefs grow in people, right? You start with one premise here and you branch off with some things. But guess what? These beliefs, branches, if you will, they could only exist because this initial sprout showed up. That initial idea was solid enough to actually produce a result, right? And it keeps going in the direction of that initial premise, that initial idea. And so this entire thing is based upon like really just one core belief. And those of you in strategy immersion training, you know all about core beliefs because we talk about taking these little surface beliefs and discovering what's really at the source of all of it, like what's really at the core. But if you want to change this, like I said, plant, you've got to prune it the same way that if you want to change your client's life, you've got to prune off beliefs. Not every belief is going to change. It's hard to get a client to just suddenly decide to believe different things, right? Like chances are that's not happening. But these recent beliefs, like if you can show them how, even though this premise may be valid, how they've maybe gone a little too far here. Like, in our recent elections, one of the beliefs I noticed from our conservative friends is that, the more liberal you are, the more violent you are, right? It's like, hey, we lost the election, but nobody's rioting in the streets, right? If we had won the election, you more liberal folks would be looting and pillaging, right? You violent people, right? That's like one of these beliefs, right? Not everybody would believe that. Most people probably wouldn't, right? Most people think that's a little extreme. But it's probably based on, hey, these individuals on that particular side of the aisle, are more for, let's say, socialized help, and maybe it caters more to people that are less educated or, not as wealthy, not as well off, not as stable. And, we observe maybe some violence coming from that side of the aisle. Then we put 2 and 2 together and we say, well, this is just the way these people are, right? But there's some basis for that. And then there's the extreme of it. You could say the same thing on the other side, right? In a million different ways that people have construed the other side of the aisle politically, right? So whatever the basis is, people and places and events and et cetera will grow off of that, different ideas, until it goes so far that it's like, this is like too far, right? People have gone too far with particular beliefs on probably the political spectrum, right? But you prune them back to whatever is like more reasonable. These actually may be okay. They might actually support somebody. The premises might be valid. But if you go so far down that road, it might ultimately limit your client or it might limit you. So that is just one kind of metaphor, if you will, for the way beliefs grow out of each other. Because if you don't have a basis for believing the next thing, you can never get there. People trying to convince me that everyone on the liberal side of the aisle is is going to loot and pillage, and they're insane. I'm not going to buy into that, right? But if they got me to buy into this, then it's possible eventually over a period of, let's say, years, that I might actually get to something that's a lot more extreme if I really buy into the initial kind of thesis, if you will. So that's just a little bit of a kind of a conceptual map around how beliefs grow off of each other. So let me give you a really extreme one. And again, coming back to the premise here, beliefs turn into a lens which shapes the next belief, which becomes a lens, which further shapes beliefs. You really want to get that. It's like you don't see the world. You never actually see the world. Your clients are never looking at the world. You're simply seeing what your beliefs allow you to see. That's all you're actually seeing. So whatever you're seeing that's allowed by your beliefs, that then populates newer beliefs, which then further filter and aggregate what you can possibly actually see, and on and on and on. Just like I showed you with that particular example. So not only is what you believe not true, what made that possible for you to believe it, that's not true either, right? None of it's per se true. Now, could you say that's a pretty good story that you could sell me on, or it's very convincing? Or could you say, hey, I've got evidence of that? Yeah, you could say all those things, but it's not like true, like that's all there is. There's lots of different ways that you could see the world. There's lots of different ways you can see anything that actually has a basis in fact and reality. So your particular opinions, your particular beliefs aren't necessarily true. And in fact, what even made it possible for you to believe those things, that's not true either. They're just beliefs. And you've got to see that. And it's really just as important to see it in yourself as in your clients, because if you can't see it in yourself, what you're going to do is you're going to filter everything that comes from your clients through your own rigid ideas and beliefs. I get this all the time from our students. Well, this is the way things are, and I see things this way, and there's people are so rigid in their beliefs. It's like then they say, well, why aren't I building my practice? Why am I not able to reach people as a coach? It's like that's why you're coming from your own narrow, untrue premise that's shaped by other narrow, untrue premises from years and years, and you think that helps you be a great coach? No, it doesn't. It just holds you back. So, wisdom, that's great. Knowledge, okay, fine. But beliefs and being hyper intense about those beliefs or hyper narrow with those beliefs, you're only hurting your own coaching by doing that. You're never going to reach anybody other than people just like you. And by the way, the people that you're coaching, there's going to be a ton that aren't just like you. If they're just like you, they don't need your coaching. They need somebody else, somebody who's gone beyond where they are at, chances are. If you're just finding people like yourself, you're just finding another person who's more like they're your friend. Does that make sense? So let me give you one example from a very extreme, this is a very extreme example. And I looked this up today as a little bit of research for this discussion around beliefs, because I really want you to get how insane your beliefs actually are. I want you to get how insane your clients really are getting by the time you get to them, by the time they're actually so stuck that they can't get out of their own way without like your help. Okay, we really got to get this, and we need to be able to pass it on to our clients, so we're not holding ourselves back with our own beliefs. And also, once we're able to reach our client, we know how to actually work with them as to their craziness that comes out of this long lineage of belief systems. So this is a perfect example, I think, here. There's all sorts of different cults that do just what we would consider to be extreme and insane things, but the good old Heaven's Gate cult uh, in the time of Hale Bopp. I think this was 96, 97 when this happened. Hale Bopp comet came up. They basically all got together in San Diego. They all drank the purple Kool-Aid, and this is literally like a legend now. People talk about when they buy into a set of beliefs that they drank the Kool-Aid. You know, I mean, it's literally part of our story of people buying into ideas that maybe weren't originally their own, right? So anyway, Heaven's Gate cult, they had some beliefs, as you might imagine. Now, you might say, well, you know what? Those people, whatever they did, they believe insane, crazy, ridiculous things. That has nothing to do with me. I'm totally reasonable. Those individuals are stupid, superstitious, crazy people, and that's why they drank the Kool-Aid. I guess it wasn't Kool-Aid. I think it was like they had some barbiturates or something, and they killed themselves that way with like applesauce. Who cares? The point is, they killed themselves, like 30 or 40 of these guys killed themselves, and you got to think, hey, they had to have some really insane beliefs to allow that to occur. And the truth is actually quite different based upon what I've seen, and you will see this in most extreme behavior, cult behavior in groups or individuals for that matter, for the most part. So, they had some insane beliefs, to be fair, the way that what would we would see as insane. But they also had some actually fairly plausible beliefs that if you heard your friends say them, you might laugh a little bit, but you'd probably be willing to talk to them about it. You wouldn't like shy away from them, right? Fairly plausible ideas, right? And yes, there were some beliefs that they had that were maybe a little bit in the middle. They were stretching reality. So let's actually map this out, because I think you're going to see as we look at this map how insanity actually came from plausible beginnings, okay? And I'm going to do this as detailed as I can without running out of room, because I only got one slide for this here. So here's something that's not just plausible, it's totally factual in their world and in our world as well. The comet. There was a comet coming. That is absolutely fact by anybody's measurement. If you trust, scientists and people who look up at the stars, there was a comet. It was coming at a certain time. We knew that was, it's at least plausible. If you said that and you looked it up on Wikipedia, you'd say, yeah, Hale Bopp comet's coming in 96 or 97 or whatever it is. Here's another belief that's maybe somewhat plausible at least. And I'm just going to shorten this for simplicity. Extraterrestrials exist. Sure, I misspelled that, but you get the idea. So ET exists, right? Now, look, you may not agree with that. You may say, no, there's no extraterrestrials. I don't know why you necessarily believe that versus this. There's no evidence that they don't exist. There's not necessarily any evidence that they do, from what I can gather, or what most of us can gather. But more or less, it's actually plausible. You talk to very reasonable scientists, some pretty serious people in terms of studying the universe, and they say, no reason why they wouldn't exist, per se. We probably are never going to meet them, but hey, ET exists. It's a plausible belief, relatively speaking, compared to what we're going to see in the insanity department. You may not agree. Tons of people think ET is out there somewhere. Very reasonable people, probably people that you have met and respect their opinions, okay? Here's another one, very plausible belief by most of society's standards, not everybody. This one's a tough one, though. Christianity. If you study Heaven's Gate, their beliefs were actually very much based in Christianity, Christian lore, okay? How many people do you know, at least in Western society, that actually are Christian or share some Christian beliefs, or at least base some of their ideals in Christianity, right? Probably quite a few people. Okay, so pretty darn plausible for most, most reasonable, God-fearing people, right? Here's one more. I'll give you one more. So still fairly plausible. Everything we've got so far in the Hail Bop Heaven's Gate crazy people cult is pretty much like, hey, I could hang out with that person. They seem pretty reasonable, right? And they killed themselves. Okay, this is where we're going, which is insane. But here's one last one. This one's a little spiritual. My spirit isn't my body. Okay, my spirit is not my body. Most people, if they're caught in a spiritual conversation, would probably say, okay, it's body and spirit, two different things. Like one is not the other. Fair? It's pretty basic. So this is where tons of the behaviors and insane ideas that the Heaven's Gate cult started with before they were Heaven's Gate, right? Christianity, there's a comet coming, my spirit isn't my body, and ET exists. This is pretty much it. It's all you got to believe, and you could be a cult goer. So now, how did these get stretched? Because that's usually what happens next, right? We were talking about that kale plant that grows even further. They didn't just stop with these beliefs. They went farther, right? But they based the new beliefs that they were creating off of some of these ideas, off of these beliefs that they were fairly certain about. So, for instance, here's one. This one's easily a stretch. I'm chosen by prophecy. Okay, now that's a stretch. Most people, even though, now by the way, the prophecies that this guy was basing this belief on were Christian prophecies. So he read some of the books of the Bible, started getting these ideas that, the prophecy they're talking about, these chosen people in modern times, like, hey, I think that's me. Fair enough? Like a stretch, right? Like, how do you know that's you? And, there could be other people that think that's them and that's not if it's you. And, you obviously could have an argument about that one, right? But I'm chosen by prophecy doesn't sound necessarily completely insane, but it definitely starts sounding like this guy's stretching his realm of reality now. So he's starting to push it a bit. But again, Christian prophecies, a lot of people believe those. Just saying, hey, well, I'm one of those people. If this is reality, why can't that be reality? Seems like it could at least be, maybe not plausible, maybe a stretch, but just a stretch, not insanity necessarily. At least if you really are pretty intense about that, and trust this person at all with what they're saying, or trust them at all just in any basis at all. So let's keep going here. So here's one that's a good deal of a stretch, but not insane. I'm going on a spaceship. Okay, I'm going on a spaceship. It's a stretch, right? Now, could this be true? If I told you, hey guys, live stream tonight, I'm going on a spaceship. Just wanted to let you know. Can't wait. I'll let you know how it went. Now, you might doubt that a bit, but it's actually something that is within the realm of absolute reality. The people nowadays, you got enough money, you're willing to blow enough of your money, you can go on, Virgin Galactic, probably in the next 5 years or so, and you're going to be in space on a spaceship. People literally now can do this, right? Not a lot. It's a stretch, right? But not absolutely insane. Now, that said, back when Hail Bop Heaven's Gate was going on, we're talking about the 90s, that was not really available. So this is much more of a clear stretch than nowadays, which is this, you could probably argue, for anybody that knows what they're talking about, this starts to move into the plausible category, relatively speaking, okay, compared to the insane side. So I'm going on a spaceship. This is kind of predicated on, hey, a comet's coming. The comet is, kind of our spaceship. And then, these ideas of, ET and whatnot. this is kind of based in that collective area, right? So a stretch, but based upon, hey, if there's a comet coming, ET exists. Hey, you know what? Maybe I could be going on a spaceship. That's possible. It's a big stretch, but okay, I could see that might be possible. So now there's plenty of other stretch beliefs that we don't have time to talk about, but let me just give you a sense of how far they took it, and how if you just have a few of these beliefs that are actually based in very plausible ideas and beliefs that almost all of us would at least say, I guess so, maybe, if not, maybe actually have a reason to buy into, whether it's real or not. Some of these got really insane by almost anyone's judgment. So here's a good one. I'll put this one over here, actually. I'm Jesus. Right? So now, by the way, if I can buy into this one, that this guy's chosen by prophecy, hey, the I'm Jesus thing starts to sound pretty darn plausible, right? For most of us that just meets a guy on the street that says I'm Jesus, insane, right? But if we can start where they were starting with and kind of move on from there, it starts to, hey, if I buy in, like, hey, my cult leader is chosen by prophecy, him saying that he's Jesus, yeah, okay, I could probably buy that. It might take a little convincing, but I'm in that realm. Here's another one that was kind of predicated on that to some extent as well, which was, I can't die. And this one was obviously, maybe to some extent, driven by the I'm Jesus belief, right? But others as well, like my spirit isn't my body. Well, hell, if I am my spirit more than my body, then if my body and my spirit are separate, well, then I can't really die, right? Sounds plausible. I mean, that's actually based in a plausible belief to some extent. That's not that logically off the reservation. Here's another one. This one's definitely seemed pretty insane. I'm an alien. I'm an alien, right? So, hey, if I believe this guy's going on a spaceship, maybe I might believe they're an alien as well, right? Now, again, there's all sorts of other beliefs that came together to lead us to this. I'm oversimplifying this by far. But, well, gosh, if aliens exist and this guy's going to go on a spaceship, then, yeah, I guess maybe he could be an alien, right? No, he's an alien who happens to be Jesus also, and he can't die. So that's a lot to stomach in one sitting in a lunch meeting, right, with this guy. But over time, I don't know, if I start with certain beliefs that allow me to kind of see things that aren't in front of me with like a level of faith, certain science or science fiction, let's say, a combination of those, blurring the lines in those, and some spirituality. I mean, that's basically what Heaven's Gate was. It's a combination of Christianity, New Age beliefs, and sci-fi. They just took an amalgam of those three things and started kind of thrashing them around. And this guy was obviously, I'm sure, charismatic enough to convince people of some of the basics. And then they just kind of move along and collectively start to believe. And of course, we got to isolate you from your family. So, because your family hears anything that's in the stretch category, they're going to start rejecting this stuff. And that doesn't really work for continuing down the crazy, the road to crazy town, so to speak. Right? But we do this within our own cults, within our own peer groups, within ourselves as well. A lot of people who get really isolated and don't hang out with a lot of people don't get a chance to do what they call a reality check, which is basically just checking it against other people's reality. Doesn't necessarily mean that's reality, but there's a shared reality that people co-create around the way their beliefs bounce off of each other, right? But there's some people that are so isolated that they start with whatever might be plausible, they start stretching and nobody takes them back, and then they go into insanity. That can happen quite quickly. So, and here's the final one that I'll add in this example. I'll just put it down here. Can you even see this? Yeah, I guess you can. All right. I'm going to a space home. It's really a new space home. I'm just new. All right. And of course, we can see already, well, that one, if you're an alien, I guess that's okay because ET goes home, right? And that is the premise for believing that, if I'm in this cult, I believe my leader's Jesus and that we can't die and that, you know, we are aliens or we're going to hitch a ride on an alien spacecraft and go home. Well, if the physical body is just a vessel and my spirit is more, and we're just going to get out of, they literally called the body a vehicle at the time to kind of divorce themselves from it, right? That's another idea I didn't have room for here. But yeah, I'll take your drugs and then kill the body off so I can hitch a ride on the Space Express and move to the higher level of existence, right? Sounds good to me. Now, some people won't be motivated by that, and that's fine. Like everybody's got their own motivations, but you, me, and your clients, we generate our beliefs not based upon what's true. Now, we'll start in what's plausible, sure, what's acceptable, what people allow us to believe, right? But why we come up with these, as we've talked about in training, is because they meet our needs. Like I guarantee every one of those individuals that killed themselves there, they were meeting all of their survival needs by killing themselves because they were believing in a significance that was beyond Earth. They were believing in a connectedness because they were with several, many other people, 40, 50, 60 other cult members that were on their way somewhere. So that connected them with them. They were certain because they were very convinced in these beliefs. They'd probably seen some things that convinced them and made them believe that this really is true. And they're going to move on to a new place, right? They're going to their new space home. They met all their survival needs by killing themselves. But in order to do that, they had to have some beliefs to line that up. And these beliefs all along the way met their needs as well. Because you won't believe anything that doesn't meet your needs. For a whole variety of reasons, that's not, however, the subject of this thesis here. We're talking about how beliefs actually grow, and they get to the point where they're just, to you and me, they seem insane, but to your client, totally plausible based upon all the other areas that, all the other things that they already believe. And we'll get into how you do your job with understanding this insanity of your client once we kind of pair off this thesis here. So I'm just going to share with you a few little reports. This is mostly Wikipedia. So again, kind of part of the story of Hale-Bopp, but think about, as I share this with you, as I'm going to read off the page here, think about how belief and how going from plausibility to a stretch to insanity was something that maybe wasn't effortless, but it was a logical and progressive process for these individuals, just like it was for you or I to go far left or far right politically, or to decide to do something that maybe most of the society would say, that seems like a ridiculous career, this coaching thing, or whatever it is that you are that differs from the people around you, right? Think about what you have in common with these crazy people. Think about what your client has in common with these supposed crazy people, because this is you and I. That's the whole point here. We're the inmates in the asylum. Now, this to you is obviously insane, chances are, to most of us, but your version of this is not, because that's yours, that's based upon your plausible beliefs. So think of see yourself in what I'm about to share. See your client in what I'm about to read you. So most of the cult leaders' crew hailed from very diverse backgrounds. So they came from all sorts of different backgrounds, not just this world that was plausible to them. Most of them are described by researchers as having been longtime truth seekers. They wanted to find what was true. They wanted to discover what to believe, right? So can a truth seeker look to the stars? Can a truth seeker think about aliens? Can a truth seeker think about spirituality or Christianity? You bet. Haven't you and I done that at one point or another? I bet you we have. So can you see yourself to some extent in really what originally seemed probably pretty plausible to the people that entered into this death cult? So they were long-time truth seekers or spiritual hippies who had long since believed in attempting to find themselves. Sounds reasonable, doesn't it? Hey, I need to find myself. Believed in attempting to find themselves through spiritual means, combining faiths in a sort of cultural milieu, I pronounce that, well into the mid 80s. So this is way back when, right? They had all this variety of different cultures that came together to form some of these plausible beliefs. While the group was against suicide, I mean, this is just the irony of this. They all committed suicide. They're against suicide, right? Heavensgate.com still exists. Check it out. You can just go heavensgate.com. The original website that was, I guess, back in the 80s or 90s, I guess the 90s, is still there. And they even have a link to their thoughts on suicide on the web page. I saw this today. And yet they killed themselves. So let me explain. While the group was against suicide, they defined suicide in their own context to mean to turn against the next level when it is being offered. So it's like, hey, I could go to the next level, and if I don't take it on, then that's suicide. It's like spiritual suicide, right? So there, my spirit is in my body. You know, I can't die is more of a, well, I could die if I killed my spirit and I didn't move on to the next level, right? Where was I? Turn to the next level is being offered, and believe their human bodies were only vessels meant to help them on their journey. Suicide, therefore, suicide, therefore, would be not allowing their consciousness to leave their human bodies to join the next level. So not killing yourself is suicide. Oh yeah, that makes total sense. Right? Remaining alive instead of participating in the group suicide was considered suicide of their consciousness, like of their spirit. In conversation, when referring to a person or a person's body, they routinely used the word vehicle. Great. But you can get, though, if you think about it that way and language your beliefs in this way and really buy into it, you can see how you eventually go into what, again, most people would judge as pretty insane. Now, this is more general. This is not about our Heaven's Gate subject here. This is more generally around cults. Cults say you have to break out of your Western mentality. This is a guy that specializes in cult deprogramming. He says the cults will try to convince you you're being too judgmental. You have to abandon your whole psychological, intellectual framework, beliefs, right? You have to abandon your beliefs that disagree with our maybe somewhat plausible beliefs. Your obsessive materialism is blocking you from seeing the truth. What is the truth? Beliefs, right? It's blocking, like, your focus on current Western society's beliefs is blocking you from looking at our non-materialistic beliefs, the kind of beliefs that would get you to do some kind of crazy stuff, chances are, but non-materialistic, right? So if we can put down other beliefs, then maybe our beliefs can win. You see that happening in any other area of society, maybe politically lately, right? It's a constant battle putting other people's beliefs down, trying to get them to come over to our side, criticism of certain frameworks and entire worldviews, because our worldview is the right view, right? What you really want to get, and what I know we've been talking about in strategy training, is that your beliefs and your client's beliefs aren't about what's true. It's about what meets your needs, because you wouldn't believe those things if they didn't meet your needs. But that's a whole nother story. That's one of the other reasons why somebody will end up going down this kind of blind alley and get trapped. So, all right. So anyway, this is one last comment I saw made on one of these sites that was talking about our Heaven's Gate subject matter here. When you really think about it, when you break down these people's beliefs again, it really is just the Bible plus Star Trek. It doesn't seem any crazier than every other religion. Now, most religions that are accepted in our society, and we can appreciate, don't kill themselves at the end, to going the farthest down that path, of course. So this guy's probably stretching a bit, but that's why we have this model set up in this particular way. So this is meant to give you an idea of how insane people can get and how it actually can start in a very seemingly reasonable place. And that's exactly where you and I, and again, your client, started. They started with something that probably everybody would appreciate. When we were 7.5 or we were 12, for the most part, we didn't have much of our own beliefs. We just adopted the plausible beliefs around us that met our needs and that were acceptable, right? But we went off from there and we went on this journey of stretching those beliefs beyond probably where they started. And that's where eventually we got, well, heck, just the original plausible ones probably could get us stuck to some extent as well. All right, so here is a much more reasonable story. So this one is one that you could probably really appreciate because everything I'm about to share with you, most of my students, at least, that I've worked with, would probably say that everything I'm about to share with you is totally reasonable and it's all just kind of logical, right? But it's just what I'm attempting to identify here or show you is that these eventually, when we stretch them, are just as insane as the death cult that we just described. So these are beliefs about cold calling, right? So selling from the phone to strangers, right? So let's start out with a very plausible belief for most people, especially most coaches. You know, salespeople take advantage of people. I'll just put take advantage. I don't want to take advantage of people. I don't want to sell. Very natural for a lot of individuals in Western society. Here's another one. Anybody that's done cold calling, it's not hard. This is very plausible, or even if they haven't. Cold calling is hard. So these are all plausible. If I had a conversation with you and I said, you know what, cold calling's hard, or I said, you know, salespeople can take advantage sometimes. They sometimes take advantage of people. You probably just nod your head saying, yeah, I guess you're right. Now, you might have alternative views, especially if you're a salesperson, but most people are not salespeople, probably would appreciate and at least give that a nod and say, okay, fine, yeah, I could go along with that premise for starters. So now, we can stretch that, though, into, and by the way, this is not too uncommon for a lot of people to think, salespeople are jerks. Salespeople are jerks. Now, if you start by thinking, well, these people take advantage of people, if you go intense enough with that, it's like, hey, they're jerks. That's not that much of a stretch. I mean, it is a stretch, but it's not that much of one, right? So here's another one that maybe is on the borderline that some people might feel is plausible, others might not. Strangers don't want to talk. So maybe somewhat plausible. And if you take both of these, which are fairly plausible beliefs, cold calling is hard, strangers don't want to talk, you could easily come up with the belief about cold calling, that cold calling is a waste of time. Right? So, you know, this is a stretch probably for a lot of people, but not that hard to get to that stretch if you believe it's hard and strangers don't want to talk, right? Suddenly now we're believing this whole entire practice that's made people, you know, billions of dollars over a history of doing it since the phone was invented is a pretty much a total waste of time, and the people that do it are jerks, right? This is when, if you're in the bar and you hear people say something like this, it probably wouldn't, like, you wouldn't think, well, oh my gosh, that person's crazy, we better steer clear of them. You just think, well, that's a bit of a stretch, right? So, but they came from very plausible beliefs. So, and then you end up with, at the end of the day, let's just write these down here. All right, so now we're going to generalize this. Prospecting makes zero money, right? Now we're not just talking about cold calling. We're talking about just general sales practices. Prospecting won't make you any money. This is a very common belief, actually, in my world, okay? And I see coaches who this stops them every day from making any kind of progress in their business. That's real progress they could make. I also see coaches that don't believe this, never believed it, or got themselves over this belief that are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year as well. So, yeah, pretty insane from my perspective to think that, knowing what I know. But you could see how if you start with these simple premises, this isn't too far behind. And by the way, well, we'll get to the point of this in a second. Final insanity belief, from my perspective at least. So this, again, not just a stretch, pretty insane. Prospecting makes me a soulless, greedy, soulless, greedy, and hated. How's that for a disempowering belief around prospecting and cold calling and sales activities, right? All from salespeople are jerks and cold calling is a waste of time. I mean, these kind of combine, as you can see, right? So these to me are quite insane, but I literally work with coaches who believe these things, or at least act as if they do, whether or not they would actually say this, right? So here's the point with this. This is a trap. If you believe these things all the way, especially down to the insanity part, even this would probably not be a great premise. But if you go all the way down to this, you've trapped yourself. You've trapped yourself in your business. You're probably not going to have any business or very much. There's other ways you can get that business, right? But a lot of those don't work very well initially, at least, right? So it's a trap. It's a blind alley. It narrows your world. This limits you from moving into this area that you might not even have any experience with. By the way, if you actually took action, let's say I said, hey, you got to go prospect, and then you did that, but with these beliefs, how effective do you think you'd be? You wouldn't be effective at all. You'd be wasting time, right? You would probably feel like people are going to hate you. You would do a lousy job doing it, right? So now, hopefully, if I could push you to the point where you'd actually start making some money, maybe that would turn that around, but I doubt it. Because these beliefs might bend a little bit, but they're not going to break. I got to prune this back and work with somebody like this to the point where they can come back to their premise and at least question this, if not the premise itself that it came from. So that's just one example of your potential insanity or your client's insanity that is very much accepted by a lot of people around us. So, although your beliefs seem to support you and meet your needs, which they do, I mean, they definitely meet needs or else we wouldn't believe them, and they seem to be in line with reality, your beliefs have little to do with reality, and they essentially trap you in your current life with a web of lies, as I mentioned before. They warp your reality and they kill off your greatest possibilities. That's what your beliefs do for you. That's what your clients' beliefs do for them. And wherever you're stuck because of your beliefs. You just are. I mean, unless there's external issues, and like 9 times out of 10, there are not external issues, or the external issues really aren't stopping you. It's these beliefs that stop people. That's it. And so they seem plausible. They seem like they make a lot of sense, but they bottom line destroy what's possible for you, your client, etc. That's how they form. So that said, I shouldn't have thrown that away because I don't have anything else to write. But Now the question might be, okay, now what do I do with this, Jeff? Now that I know, like, I'm insane, my clients are insane, and this insanity comes from something that's plausible, but then we push it and push it and push it and take it farther. And the ultimate conclusion is this narrow little life that doesn't let us do anything for ourselves, doesn't, it keeps us bound in this one stuck little place that made us feel good one time way back when. Now what do I do with this? Other than what we've been training you in, which, again, we're not getting into tonight. We don't have time to cover everything. Knowing this, number one, notice where your client's associations are between beliefs. Like, listen to them talk. They're going to tell you this stuff. Well, Christianity was like this, and this is the way Jesus is, and this is me, and they can explain that kind of stuff to you, and then you need to appreciate that that's their world. That's the way the world literally is for them. If you try to mess with that, they're just not even going to hear you, right? And you also want to notice how your beliefs may be keeping you from engaging with wherever they're at. So you got to discover where they're at, and it's got to discover the relationships. Like, notice one of the big focuses of those belief diagrams as I drew them were not just the beliefs, but the lines between each belief. There were associations that allowed one belief. The one belief allowed the next, allowed the next, allowed the next. Like I said, beliefs create a lens, a way of seeing the world through which you then create further beliefs, which then creates a further lens through which you see the world, and then that creates a further belief, and then on and on and on. So you want to know how that client has narrowed their focus over the years, how their beliefs have limited them more and more and more over time. Make sense? So notice those associations that are occurring between different beliefs that your client has. Second, notice and help your client see where they've gone too far with their beliefs. Notice where they've started with actually something that it seems pretty reasonable and seems to work for them and others, but then they've gone so far that suddenly they're in a realm that you and I both know doesn't work for them, and maybe they even know something's not working, but they don't realize that belief is what's having it not work for them. So notice and then help your client see which of these beliefs have just gone way too far and they're truly and obviously limiting them. And then finally, notice also and help your client see where maybe they haven't gone far enough. In other words, there could be some beliefs that your client could take on based upon already existing beliefs that would motivate them, that would actually get them to push themselves farther. Now, obviously, we don't want to get to the Heaven's Gate farther of like saying, hey, suicide is not to like go take this spaceship with us and take the poison. Like that might be going too far in the wrong direction, right? But where does your client choose to go? Like, how can you support them in finding ways that they can intensify or create new beliefs off of beliefs and lenses that they already have that would actually support them in taking their journey where they truly actually want to go? That would take them farther down their own road that they've chosen. Not some cult gave them, or not that their parents gave them, not that their boss gave them, not that society gave them, but that they have chosen for themselves. Or at least that they say they've chosen for themselves at this point. Because obviously people can base goals on beliefs that are given to them by others as well. And so you could be sensitive to that. But the bottom line is, notice where they've gone too far and what you need to prune. Like what beliefs need to be like upended and shifted. And then which beliefs should be added that could actually be added based upon your client's current worldview versus just doing a complete core transformation of all of their beliefs. Now, I'm not saying you can't do that. That's usually not going to happen in one initial session that you have with your client, right? But you can prune some pretty insane beliefs. And it'll be obvious to them why those need to be pruned. You can add some new beliefs that are going to empower them that are based on current ways that they see the world, the current thesis they have for the way the world is, and synthesize some of that into something that's even better for them or that's going to get them down the road that they really want to go down. Make sense? So that's what to do with this. If you got anything out of this, please like the video wherever you are, Facebook or especially YouTube, because it shares this with more people like you that we can actually help and make a difference for. Hopefully they can make a difference for their clients. And also it'll supposedly give you more access to more of these as they come through if it was at all valuable to you. And the guaranteed way to see these live streams when they do come out is to go over to our YouTube channel and subscribe and hit the bell, because that way, whatever device you're on that you actually have YouTube plugged into, it'll give you a little push notification when I do go live like this, and when we create more information and training content like you got today. So if you could be my partner in sharing this with people that you know could hear it, you know this would make a difference for them. By the way, especially like if you got clients that need to change some beliefs, this might be the perfect conversation to introduce them to that level of flexibility they need to have, so they can be limbered up, so they can be agile enough to work with you in that premise, and also have this conversation with them, of course, as well. So look forward to you seeing our next live stream. That'll be next week for Strategy Immersion Training. Take care.